Welcome to Clinical Academia Getting Started, a Manchester Catalys podcast. In this series, we're not just sharing stories, but also tackling the challenges that clinicians face and highlighting the opportunities available when starting out in research. In today's episode, we're focusing on midwifery, and we'll be talking about the barriers, the doubts, and the practical realities that midwives often face when starting out on a research career. Today, I'm joined by Soo Downe, a midwife and Professor of Midwifery Studies at the University of Lancashire, and Meg Hyslop-Peart, an early career midwifery researcher based at Manchester University NHS Foundation Trust. So between you, we have the more experienced perspective and also the real current reality of what is happening for early career midwife researchers. I'm just going to jump right in there. So Meg, I'm going to start with you. When you first sort of thought about getting started in research, did it feel exciting or intimidating or a bit of both?
I think more exciting. Yeah, it's more of an exciting thing. I've always wanted to get into research. So a reason I wanted to work at St Mary's is because I knew that there was research there. So that was what attracted me to work there in the first place. And I've been a research midwife in the past, so doing research delivery, and really enjoyed that, but it wasn't quite what I was, wanting to do long term. So now I'm actually getting to do what I've always wanted to do. So it's mostly exciting, but there is definitely intimidating parts to it and lots of personal barriers that you have to overcome.
Have there ever been times when you've thought research is not for people like me?
No, it's not that I've thought research is not for people like me. It's just how can I be the right person for research is probably what I've thought. So what is it that I need to do? Because the paths are not clear in terms of how you get from A to B and where do you start and what's available and how will I afford more training? All of those sorts of different things, really.
So a lot of questions, but no sort of inherent discomfort about the whole idea.
No, mostly excited about it. Mostly like I've always wanted to do it. I've just not known how.
Is that something that you often hear from early career midwives?
Definitely. I mean, there are far more people working in clinical practice who want to do research than are able to. So I think Meg's account is a good one. Sometimes people come to it slowly. So they practice, the questions arise in their minds and they think, actually, I'd like to answer this question. So that's the best way to do it. Sometimes, it sounds like in Meg's case, people almost come into midwifery with a research intent at the end. And that's probably increasingly the case as there are more opportunities available. But certainly in the past, it was probably more people going into practice, wanting to practice for a few years to get their experience and then starting to think, hang on a minute, there's some things here I don't understand, I want to find out about. So yeah, different ways.
Why do you think there can be that sort of distance between practice and research?
I think people who go into practice, generally speaking, as I say, particularly in the past, when I did my training as a midwife, it wasn't even a diploma, let alone a degree. There was no academic qualification at the end of it. I mean, I had already done a degree, so I came in with a degree, but the qualification itself had no academia attached to it. So I think people who came through those kinds of routes before it became a degree level program probably came in because they wanted to do something practical. And for them, research was really, something to do with, certainly not practical, something cerebral. And I think as people become more engaged with the questions, they begin to realize that actually the kinds of things they ask every day in clinical practice can also become the kind of things they ask in academia.
Yeah, I mean, that's so interesting to hear, how that can work together. Something that I'm always curious about is how research can work with the demands of clinical practice. So Meg, I'm wondering, how have you made it work, being a sort of full-time practicing midwife? How have you managed to fit research into that?
I think it's really difficult because it's not built into our job plans or contracts. It's not seen as part of something that we should be doing in our daily roles. So the only way that I've been able to be successful with it is by being given awards, so applying for the awards. So pre-application support fund gave me the time to put together a competitive application for the time that I'm now bought out for, to really think and focus. So I'm, out of clinical practice essentially. So yeah, I don't think it's very easy to do it alongside your clinical practice, would be the honest answer. I think it's challenging to train how to do it and work clinically at the same time.
So it's all about getting those funding opportunities that buy out some of your time.
Yeah, and there's lots of funding opportunities. It's about knowing about them, isn't it? And knowing how to apply for them. So talking to people who have done it before, I think, is really important. And just joining networks, speaking to people who are in the field or who have done similar things, because they'll know about other opportunities. Might not be the same one that they went on, but it's just trying to learn as much as you can about what is out there, because there is actually a lot out there once you start looking.
From your perspective, Sue, how have you seen midwives managing, the demands of clinical practice alongside trying to get research careers going?
So I think partly through the route that Meg's talked about. Also, just as an example, we have a network of midwife practitioners who are interested in research in the Northwest. And some of the work we've done in the past has been starting with audits, so service audits across the patch, and publishing some of the results of those audits. So building the capacity of people within their job and getting them publications, so they've got something on their portfolio, so they can then go and apply for, because sometimes to apply for these awards, you have to have a starting point. So it's providing a space where they can do that as part of their job, as part of a group, and then gradually build it up. Sometimes it's through master's programs, so working with master's students, midwives who want to do masters, and they do that part-time, and then working with them to make sure their dissertation is publishable, so that again, they get that in terms of building their portfolio. And it's useful for us as well, because as supervisors, you co-publish. So there are, apart from the formal routes, there are the formal funded routes, which are expanding, definitely, as Meg says. There are other ways of getting on the ladder. And if people really aren't interested in necessarily having a research career, but just want to weave research into their practice, some of those routes are quite useful, actually, and beneficial. So yeah, finding a network where they've already got questions. Some questions can be answered with very small amounts of money, if that's of interest to the trust you're working in, because they can help you to operationalize something that they want the answer to. And the other thing I would just say, actually, in terms of that, is the ARCs are also now the ARCs, I always forget what the acronym stands for. But anyway, it's a chunk of money that's given to regions to spend on implementation of research into practice. And we've just had a new one awarded, I think, in our ARC. It's not quite the same from Manchester. I think you probably have had yours, though. It's a different ARC. But they are available for, they provide internships. So, those are small amounts of time per week that you can be funded out, you can be taken out of your job for a day a week or whatever for a short period of time. They fund studentships, PhD studentships, so people can go and engage with the PhD as clinical practitioners. And they also fund things like, again, in our particular ARC, what's called RACES, which is short, sharp, systematic reviews that you can be released up for, do the review with experts, and then get it published. So at the regional level, there are those kinds of opportunities as well.
It's applied research collaboration.
There you go.
If anyone is hearing that, I think you need to Google it. It's NIHR applied research.
That's the one.
Brilliant. Really good tip. The ARCs provide a lot of support for people. One thing I'm aware of is we often talk about things that people should be doing or should be doing more of or need to start doing. Is there anything that we could stop expecting midwives to do that would help them to further a research career or get started or make the space?
It's up to Meg or me.
I suppose I was coming to you, actually, but...
I'd be interested to hear Meg's view on this. I think in terms of not just research, but generally, there's an awful lot of tick box bureaucracy that midwives have to engage in. Probably more than obstetricians, actually. Probably the same for nurses. That if we streamlined that, took away, de-implemented things that are not working or in fact are harmful, of which there are a number that we're doing in practice, freed up midwives' time as a consequence, not only to be with women, which they do need more time to do their job properly, but also then to have thinking time where they can start to construct questions and ideas that might be of interest. And also talking time, just time to talk with their colleagues, bounce ideas off with their colleagues. So, I think there is a problem with the amount of time that practitioners spend writing notes and filling in boxes in duplicate. And in fact, as one of those studies I was telling you about, a cross-regional study that was a kind of started for 10 for people in clinical practice. Some years ago, we did this in our region. And the question was, how many times does a woman's name and hospital number have to be recorded during labour and birth? And I can't remember. It was something, I'm making this up, but it was along the lines of 40 times or something like that. This is what it was writing. So front of a page, back of a page, top of a page, in the computer, in the records, so on and so forth. So that's a very tiny example of a huge amount of time that's spent doing something which really should be streamlined. And there are many, many examples like that could be taken into account, I think.
Meg, what are your views?
I think, it's thinking time. That's what the awards buy you, is time to really think and reflect and understand what it is you're actually trying to achieve, and how to go about it. And just that break, I think, is really what I needed personally. I couldn't just jump in whilst working full time because I felt too lost, I think, until I had that time.
So it is being willing to give people some time away. Clinic. Meg, coming back to you, you talked about how winning that award, the pre-doctoral fellowship, the NIHR, has given you some of that time to really start developing your clinical academic career. But I know the reality is that even to win one of those, you already have to have some research experience. What were your very first steps into developing your research career?
So it's probably being a research midwife, I'm sure, helped with that, because I got some publications through that as well. Not first author, but, through working on different projects. I was the lead midwife for the region for GBS3 to help set up trusts to be ready for that trial. So that was quite a good experience. Trying to think what else. It wasn't the first time I applied that I got that award as well, which I think is really important to acknowledge, is that it was the second time I'd applied, and you can only apply twice as well. So it was kind of my last attempt, really. But the first time I applied, I got quite a lot of feedback about what it was I didn't like, and what I hadn't really appreciated was how important the place was, and because it's the 3 Ps that they look for: project, place, and person. And I didn't big up my workplace or my university enough, and really fell down there and fell down in other places as well. So I managed to adapt it all. So I think that was kind of that setback, and then reflecting and then showing myself and them that I was resilient and I was going to keep going was probably the first proper step in deciding that, this is definitely the path I want to take. I'm not going to be put off by this. And then getting that next little award that helped me to have the time to prepare my next application with more headspace meant that I was not only kind of given that confidence boost that I got the other little award, not a lost cause. And then just gave me that time. It's all about time, I think. You really do need time away from the busyness of the hospital, because it is really, really demanding. And you need time to meet with people, time to speak to people. You've got to establish supervisors. They've got to be right. You've got to decide on what it is you kind of want to do loosely for a pre-doctoral, but you still need to have an idea. So there's a lot of thinking that needs to be done in those applications.
Going back to the very first thing you said, which was around being authored on some of the publications when you were a research delivery midwife. One of the things that I'm aware of is that there are many, many research nurses and research midwives and other clinicians who are not reflected. Their names are not on the papers that are published from the research that they deliver, which personally I think is a travesty. I think that all people that contribute to research studies in any substantive way, that should be reflected. It's an important contribution. So what advice would you give if there's a research nurse listening? And I know a number personally who are research nurses, but who want to make the jump to research leadership. How can they try to gain authorship on papers, to, I suppose, have that input recognised?
I don't know, because I'm on less papers than I am on papers, because I've done a lot of I did a lot of trials and did a lot of work for a lot of trials I'm not on papers for. So I don't know. I think it was just some that I ended up on, and it's just, I didn't ask to go on them. So I can't say why that happened. Sorry, that's not really.
I just wanted to build on that, whether there might be a shift in that direction, because there's an increasing recognition that, for example, people who contribute technical support for studies should now be on papers. So the authorship rules are changing, I think. And I hadn't actually thought about it in terms of the CRN that was in a delivery network, but it may be, that is something that it might be worth discussing through something like our clinical midwife research network, because many of those are involved also in the clinical networks. To say perhaps we should be pushing for that to be much more of a common factor.
It's a lot of work that you do when you know, depending on what the trial is. There was one trial I did where I would consent them at booking, and then I would speak to them every fortnight because they were taking the medication that I needed to know about their side effects, and I had to go through a number of questions. I had to take bloods from them. But yeah, I didn't get any acknowledgement on that one. So, you know, it's kind of, the PI did, but I wasn't the PI.
So maybe there's a piece of work there, I think.
Definitely. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think we have got beyond the situation, which is still there in quite a lot of Europe, where the senior person always gets their name on first, no matter if they've done nothing. I think we are hopefully past that, but it sounds like we're not fully there yet in terms of full acknowledgement.
Something I suppose that I'm aware of, and that, you know, I sense even through this conversation with you, is how important midwifery values are, both in practice and research. Soo, your work has always centred on women's experience and compassionate care. Why is it important, I suppose, that midwives are involved in research from a values perspective? How could it change things if there were more midwives doing research, that is?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think if midwives, it depends whether midwives just do the same studies as everybody else, which sometimes does happen, or whether they are able to ask the questions that are different that midwives are engaged in, because their particular focus is different. So there are issues, I think, well, many midwives do undertake research in areas that are fairly mainstream, so birth trauma, mental health, inequalities, and they're important areas. But I think when midwives are given the space to ask the questions that are different from the midwifery perspective, they will tend to engage with relationship-focused kinds of questions, because that is the midwifery job, or at least it should be. So, and they're not the kind of questions that get asked by obstetricians, generally speaking, or people working in biomedicine or so on, because their area of interest is not the same. So I think it's the more midwives that are able and free to be in a position like Meg's in to ask questions that are not asked by anybody else, the more likely it is that we're going to be able to get a fully rounded view of what matters to women and how that is operationalised in the NHS and beyond the NHS.
Meg, just thinking, I guess, about values and that interaction between clinical practice and research, how has getting into research changed the way that you see clinical practice?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I'm not sure if it has. I don't think it's affected my clinical practice, because I've always thought research was really important. I think when you're not doing research and you're not you don't understand how it works as well. Even as a research delivery midwife, you don't fully understand everything that goes on in the background. You kind of think it's, I don't know, unreachable a little bit too complex, and you can't quite work it out. And then once you're doing it, you kind of think, oh yeah, this is really complex. But it's, I don't know, it just makes you have a different appreciation for other people's research, I think. And you just think, oh, that must have been really difficult. And you start thinking about like different things that I want to do. Are they feasible? And finding someone else that's done it. It's just really exciting. I don't know. It hasn't changed. I don't think it's changed my relationship with clinical practice as such in a different way.
Yeah. So it sounds like you were always very research aware and open to new information and new advice.
Yeah, I've always found research exciting. I've always enjoyed reading research and like knowing what's happening, and, you know, so I don't think it's just given me a different appreciation for the research itself, and I view it in a different way. I think, how did they do that? You know, how did they get that approved? And I wonder how that was for them. You know, I'm probably more interested in that side in trying to become a good researcher, a good clinical researcher.
Has it made you more critical of studies that come out and the recommendations that are based on them?
I think this is a really steep learning curve when you go into research, is to learn to be critical, because it's not something that is something that comes naturally to me. And it's very important, if you do a master's, that you can be critical. And if you're going to be a good researcher, you need to be critical. Otherwise, you're not going to produce high quality research. So it's something that I would say I'm still learning how to do, to be critical of, there was a trial that came out this year that I worked on that I was quite annoyed about the way that they presented their results, because I felt it was misleading, I suppose. I felt like, and I worried about the impact it would have. And I think that is something that I probably wouldn't have had such a big reaction to, because I probably wouldn't have interpreted it in the same way previously. I'd have just been more accepting of it. So yes, I suppose so, but still learning as well.
Yeah. I mean, just to respond to that, and I don't know if it's the same trial, it probably is.
I think it is.
But and this will give it away. But I think one also continues learning. So in the Big Baby trial, which was recent, which was a trial of women who were deemed to have large babies. And
sorry, Sue, can I just check? Was it called the Big Baby?
It was called the Big Baby trial, which is interesting in itself, isn't it? If you say to women, your baby's big, do you want to take part in the Big Baby trial? You can either be induced early because we're trying to find out whether that stops your baby getting stuck. Kind of most women aren't going to be in equipoise about that. But anyway, that to one side. But so the thing that struck me about that particular study was partly the results, as Meg says, and how they were presented, but also the fact that 6 out of 10 of the babies diagnosed as being big on scan were not big. Were not big.
Okay, so that didn't surprise me, because I did an analysis of our results locally, because we were the number one recruiter in Manchester.
Yeah.
And I knew that was going to come out.
In terms of clinical practice, before the trial, in terms of clinical practice generally, although I think, again, this is where midwives is interesting, the midwives' perspective. I think many midwives have always been a little bit suspicious about scans. But to actually see a study which showed that it was actually no better than tossing a coin, effectively, to say to a woman whether her baby was a large baby or not on scan, for something that actually is so widely used, in fact, worse than tossing a coin, because it was only 40% accurate. So for something that is the basis of such a lot of interventions that we use in practice, and subsequent to the trial continue to use in practice as if it's completely foolproof, although I had been suspicious of scans, that piece of research at this stage of my career was absolutely shocking to me. So I think you can still learn things about clinical practice, however late you are in your career. And it was a well-done study, it has to be said. So if it's a well-designed study, which gives you results which are very surprising, then that can make you question more what you thought might be acceptable in practice. Yeah.
I think there are a lot of misconceptions about clinical academic careers. Meg, what has surprised you the most since you've started on this path?
I don't know that I should have been so surprised, but I think the most important thing if you want to start out in doing clinical academia is to reach out to people and reach out to people that you admire and that you would love to work with. Even if you just have a conversation with them to hear, if you can just have a kind of, I'd like to get into this, and just listen to what they've got to tell you. Just how willing people have been and how responsive and supportive. It was just, that was really surprising, I think. And I think I took quite a while to even be able to write an email, because that was a personal barrier of, I can't email this person, they're too important. So that was something that once I got over that and realised how willing people are to help, that it was a really nice, feeling. It was I want to be in this world. I definitely want to be in this world. And I think then you already, straight away you start paying it forward. So I've spoken to a number of people since getting this award to help them to get their awards, and I'll proofread for them, or I'll just talk to them about it, or I've done presentations on it. And it's really nice, because then it means actually this is that environment, people help each other. So I don't know why I'm surprised about it. It's just that's what I found.
No, it's really lovely to hear. Sue, if you had to name the number one myth that you think stops people stepping into research, midwives in particular, could you pick one?
Oh, that's interesting. I suppose that you have to be, that the good midwives don't make good researchers. Maybe it's that. You know, if you're a good practical clinician, then you're not going to be a good researcher, or vice versa. I think I would want to burst that myth.
I think you're so right, because I think people think you have to be very academic to be a researcher, and it does help, I'm not going to lie, but actually doing well in your undergraduate degree or even your taught master's degree is a very different game to being a good academic. I think you have to think more like an entrepreneur once you're an academic, and not necessarily the best naturally academic people are the ones who are able to do that and make that shift.
Absolutely.
A lot of the clinical academics I talk to say that starting out research changed the way that they saw themselves professionally, sometimes in really surprising ways. So, Meg, has that been your experience? Have there been moments where you've doubted yourself, or moments where research has helped you sort of to step into a new identity, to discover something new about yourself?
I think it's just given me a lot of confidence. I think that getting that award was just incredible. It was really, really incredible to get to receive the award. Definitely gave me a boost of someone believes that I can do this. And even when I didn't get the award, the support around me from clinical academics, from supervisors, managers at work, consultant midwife, just everybody was very much, they still believed in me. So I think that was, it has really grown my confidence in kind of being in this world, and knowing that I am welcome here. But I think it changes more the way other people perceive you, which was probably a bit more surprising, just that I think there's a shift, and I don't want it to be that, there's a separation there that wasn't there before. That's not something that I want to happen. I don't want to be seen as a clinical academic. That means I'm no longer able to do my job. I don't want that separation to exist.
Oh, almost that doing more research, you are concerned, will lead people to think that you can't be a midwife. No,
not necessarily that, because we do have Kylie, who does both very well. But just the way, I don't know, I think people view you, I don't know, like you're not, I don't know quite how to phrase it, just not the same anymore. I don't know, like put you on a pedestal almost.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, but that's not how I see myself. I still want to be part of the midwives, so.
The gang.
The gang, yeah. Yeah.
And for anyone who's wondering who Kylie is, that's Kylie Watson, who is consultant midwife at MFT. So shout out to Kylie.
Yeah.
I know that some people will be thinking, Kylie, who's Kylie? Soo, what can we do that will help more midwives feel confident to step into this space, because I suppose I hear this and it sounds like Meg has had to be welcomed by other people to think that you would be welcome. And part of me thinks, that's just not right. We shouldn't be in a situation where people have to have a significant success. A national NIHR award is a significant success. And I don't think people should have to have that before they feel confident. What things could we do that would help people feel confident and comfortable before they reach that point?
Yeah, I guess outreach is going to be helpful. So going to trusts, and I know, again, people don't have much time, but, going to trusts, again, we've done that in the past, and just holding drop-ins and saying, just come along and have a chat to us. We're very happy to have a chat to you. Anything you bring is fine. If it's only just, how can we help you frame a question? We're happy to do that. So I think, because, humanizing the academics, I think is going to definitely help. The networks that so the network in the Northwest, I think is useful for people, and it's designed for anybody with an interest in clinical practice. It doesn't have to be somebody with a formal role. So just drop-ins, again, through those kinds of networks, I think is helpful. It all comes down to relationships every single time. So having conversations and just showing that, researchers are ordinary, and they have a clinical background, they have clinical expertise, they understand the clinical issues that people are experiencing and the day-to-day issues they're experiencing. I think it's got to be at that kind of level, really. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I think having conversations, talking about it, normalizing it is really important.
Yeah, visibility and realizing that they are normal people. That is definitely something that would be really helpful. because we don't have at Manchester University a professor of midwifery, and I think that's a real shame that there's not that leadership there for our profession. So I think that would help locally, just so yeah, that would be something that would make a difference probably.
And I also think validating the questions people have, just saying that's a really interesting question, and you've raised that through your clinical practice, and here that's something that's really worth asking. Let's do something about it. I think that's also important too. They don't have to pick up on the big issues that other people. They don't have to do a huge randomized controlled trial. They can do something simple which matters to them. I think that is really important.
Yeah, that has been really reassuring, actually. That has really made a difference. Just, because you think, I care about this, but will anybody else? And then when you'll say, yeah, I mean, you care about it because it's important. And that's really, really gives you that boost that you might be onto something, that you might actually be able to do this. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think sometimes the very, very first steps into a clinical academic career start when someone does reach out, puts themselves out there and starts asking questions and trying to find connections and that person who's going to support them. And Meg, I was so pleased to hear when you said that when you've done that, you've been surprised by how positive people are. That has not always been my own experience. I know from speaking to a lot of clinicians at that stage, that's not their experience either, and it can really scupper them. Soo, I'm wondering, from your perspective, what can we do that will help people at that very early stage overcome, sort of deal with setbacks, deal with rejection? Conversations is important, role models is important. Is there anything else that we could be doing that would start preparing, I suppose, midwives at that stage for those early rejections, grant rejections and rejections from people that they get in touch with and reach out to?
I think one of the important things is to say to them, we all get this. I still get it. People, and I'm, probably not that far away from retirement. So people at all levels of their career get it. And again, this is a little anecdote, just in case it's helpful for people. But a colleague of ours in Australia had done a lovely trial, and they submitted it to the Lancet, like you do. And it was rejected. And she was really upset with the comments from the reviewer. She was very angry, upset, heartbroken, da-da-da-da-da. So she put it in a drawer, and she left it. And then she came back to it about, 3 or 4 weeks later, looked at it and thought, actually, these reviewers' comments are really unfair. So she contacted the Lancet editor and said, these reviewers' comments are really unfair. And he said, yes, they are. So he sent it back out for review, and it was published in the Lancet. So I think sometimes it's about saying to people in the early stages of their career, we all get this kind of rejection. It doesn't mean that the thing that's been rejected is not going to be published or funded. Sometimes it's about reframing it. Sometimes we have grants applications we put in 5 years ago that we rewrite, and then they're successful just because the time wasn't right. So it's saying, yes, you will get your heart broken, but you will recover. And sometimes you'll feel so elated, it's going to be worth all that heartbreak. You just have to keep at it.
That's brilliant advice. Okay, Meg, I know that you've had a lot of positive experiences when reaching out to people, but I know that you have also experienced what it is to have a research grant fellowship application rejected. What advice would you give to an early career researcher who has really put their heart and soul into a very time-consuming application, and then they've had this news, and I suppose they don't have a lot of other successes yet to fall back on emotionally? What advice would you give them to keep going?
Take some time to feel the sadness. Take that time that you need to feel sad, and, cry if you want to cry. But you remember that you've done half the work. So, keep going. You just need to take the time to accept the criticism and then adjust it to what it is that they would like. To be honest, all the criticisms that I got were really fair. And it was really helpful because it made me think, right, okay, I need to look at who my supervisors are. Is it the right person? What do I need, what is it that is so worth funding about me going to this university? Yeah, I can completely see why you've said that. So you just don't know what they're looking for when you've never done anything like this. And it's a very different application to anything I've ever applied for before. That's you feel like you're jumping through hoops that you can't see. You don't know what it is necessarily they want from you. So with the feedback, I knew what they wanted from me. So it was a kind of okay, well, I've got one more chance. So just keep going. Talk to other people. I did get so much reassurance of this is normal. Don't worry. We've all been through this. And I think that's possibly how much it's changed over the years, because I'm only getting very positive reinforcement. And this is what research is like. You have to be resilient. It's, that's the way it is so just keep going.
That's brilliant advice. As we begin to come into land, I'm going to come to you each for 3 top tips. So Soo, I'll come to you first. If you had to limit it to 3 top tips for early career midwife researchers, what would you want to say to them?
So follow your passion, not the fashion, would be the first one. Find a mentor, as Meg said, and be prepared for rejection. I think it's those 3.
Those brilliant tips. Meg, how about you? What would your 3 top tips be?
I'm trying to think of I can't think of 3 different ones. Definitely talk to lots of people. Talk to lots and lots of people so that you find the right person to work with or people to work with that you feel comfortable with, that you can talk to and you don't feel silly. Because I think when you're sending off work and you think, oh gosh, it's really cringe. It can make you feel like, oh. So if you find someone that you find that you feel comfortable with, that's really important. So keep looking until you find that person, because you will find them. And yeah, I think that would be my main thing. Yeah, just the expect rejection has come through, I think, throughout the whole talk. So I can't think of a third one really. Just don't hold yourself back. Don't be your own worst enemy. Just send an email, ask to meet with someone. That was a personal one for me. Just actually stepping outside of my role and thinking, okay, there is a world outside of St Mary's, so I need to go and explore it a little bit and speak to people. And that when you are shy, I think you can struggle with that. I'm not a particularly shy person, but I did struggle with that.
Yeah, no, I love what you say about being cringe as well. I think fears of being cringe can hold us back. I think I'm quite naturally cringe, so I just lean into it. That fear just really can stop people. And actually, sometimes it's stepping into that awkward space that can make a difference, even if the cringe is still there. Brilliant. Right. So as we just come into our final questions. So Meg, if somebody is listening and they're thinking, I like the sound of this, but I don't know if I'm ready for a research career, what would you say to them?
Well, only they can essentially decide if they're ready or not. But I would tell them to go and talk to someone, join a network, go to some meetings, listen, go to a conference, go and listen to other researchers talking about how passionate they are about their findings. And that is so inspirational. And if you don't find that inspirational, maybe you don't want to be a researcher, but you'll probably find that you'll think, this is really cool. This is what for me. So I think it's that immersing yourself with those people, just trying to put yourself in the right environments so that you can work out if it is for you.
So dive in and get some more information.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds really sound advice. And so my final question, if someone is listening and they're thinking, this is interesting, but I'm unsure. I'm unsure if this is the right direction. What advice would you give them?
I would say just do it. Just do it. It's a bit like Meg says, do something and see if you like it or not. Because if you don't start, then you're never going to know if you like it or not. So as well as trying to find the right person, as Meg has said, just, look around your own trust, find the question that matters to you, see if you can just do a little audit or something and see what comes out of that. Maybe you'll get it published. So you could just start with baby steps. I think the other thing I would say is you have to be prepared. A lot of this is going to be in your own time. That, you don't succeed in a research career without doing a lot of work that's in your own time. And actually, I think that's true for quite a lot of professionals generally, but I think that's also important. Just be aware that if you want to do it, you're going to have to sacrifice some of your own time to do it effectively.
I really like your advice about just doing it. I think the only way to know if you're into it is to actually do it. And I think sometimes people think that if they make the decision, it's like they can't go back. And I always think, no, you can do it, finish the project and never return.
Exactly.
It's not,
absolutely.
There's nothing to lose in that sense other than some time. Brilliant advice. Well, thank you both so much for joining us today for Clinical Academia Getting Started, a Manchester Catalys podcast. If you're listening and thinking about getting started in research, We hope this episode has shown you that while there are challenges, there are also clear ways forward. You're not alone in this journey. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and share it with a friend. It really helps us in terms of the algorithm. You can also follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube for more inspiration and information to help you get started on your own research journey. Thank you for listening.